BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Friday, another Cooper Friday here on Black Box Online Radio. On Fridays this year, I've been talking to you guys about D.B. Cooper, the man responsible for the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. history. And I polled you recently, and I asked you guys, which D.B. Cooper suspects would you like to hear about? And several people said William J. Smith. And I will be discussing him in this episode, but I also want to use this as an opportunity to ask you, are there any other suspects that you would like covered in an individual profile? And also, is there a different angle or aspect of the D.B. Cooper case that you would like discussed here on BBOR, perhaps something involving the CIA or the FBI? And feel free to put anything you want in the comment section down below, and for larger things, you can send them to me at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. And I would actually like to give a shout out to an individual named John Barker, who runs a website that has several different D.B. Cooper posts, but I particularly liked the introductory segment that he wrote out for the D.B. Cooper case. Who was D.B. Cooper and what happened? On Wednesday, November 24th of 1971, the day before Thanksgiving that year, someone using the alias Dan Cooper quickly got mistaken for being D.B. Cooper, committed the most audacious act of air piracy in U.S. history with the mid-afternoon skyjacking of Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727 jetliner flying over the Pacific Northwest en route from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington with 36 passengers and 6 crew members aboard. He paid around $20 for his ticket, which included the tax for the trip to Portland. It says from the trip in Portland. Once aboard, D.B. Cooper, a nondescript man possibly with a slight Midwestern accent, ordered a bourbon and soda before passing a note to the flight attendant Florence Schaffner, demanding $200,000 in ransom money. He requested unmarked bills in 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. The note said, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." Initially, Florence Schaffner dropped the note unopened into her purse until Cooper leaned forward and said, "Miss, you'd better take a look at that note. I have a bomb." Cooper smoked 8 Raleigh filter-tipped cigarettes on the plane, but there was no evidence to show if this was a regular habit of his. The day before Thanksgiving, the flight landed at Tacoma International Airport in Seattle, Washington, where passengers were exchanged for parachutes, including possibly an NB-8 rig with a C-9 canopy, which was known as a double-shot pinch-and-pull system parachute that in 1971 would have allowed jumpers to disengage quickly from their chutes after they landed so that the wind did not drag them. D.B. Cooper was also provided with the cash in $20 bills as he had demanded, although not unmarked, it would turn out. The passengers were never aware of the threat on board. A bank in Seattle was contacted, and a bag of money with the $20 bills and all serial numbers recorded was delivered to D.B. Cooper. It totaled $200,000, and the plane refueled and then cleared for takeoff. The bag of the ransom money itself weighed 23 pounds. And the long and short of it is, D.B. Cooper would parachute into the night and never be seen from again. So, there is another reason why I wanted to look at this post from John Barker, which is available at soundingjohnbarker.wordpress.com. And that is because he asked a particular challenge question, and that is there DNA evidence that could be left behind? And I think the exact phrasing was, could there have been DNA evidence from D.B. Cooper that was left behind? You heard that he was smoking cigarettes. He smoked at least 8 cigarettes on board. He's handling a bourbon and soda glass. And also, the thing that John Barker truly wanted to point out was, did D.B. Cooper leave DNA evidence on his tie that was left behind? Because D.B. Cooper had a clip-on tie which was removed, and they had that in evidence. Now, DNA, is that possible that they have D.B. Cooper's DNA? I suppose anything is possible, but my honest answer is, I don't believe they have Cooper's DNA for the following reason. Items were not well preserved prior to the 1990s because they didn't know about DNA in 1971. They didn't know that things like DNA could be used to identify a perpetrator. And it's my understanding that the glass that D.B. Cooper handled was mixed up with all the others rather quickly, and they weren't able to identify it, so they didn't even get any forensic material off of the glass that he used to drink the bourbon and soda, and also the Raleigh cigarette butts were lost, and that, again, there's no chance that they could have obtained any type of forensic material from them. So that's a big strike against any hope of finding the DNA. But in this episode, I'm going to be talking about William J. Smith as a D.B. Cooper suspect. But first, I would like to remind you guys that this episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Capital One. You can sign up for the Capital One Quicksilver using the link below, and anybody who does that will get a $200 sign-on bonus. It's like getting free money. So William J. Smith, as previously mentioned, was someone who was requested by you guys in the comments section, and I was just over on a D.B. Cooper suspect list, and the reason why I chose to listen to your suggestion was I was scrolling up and down, and I don't think I've seen a closer match to the D.B. Cooper composite sketches than William J. Smith. The issue is that there are multiple composite sketches of D.B. Cooper because people spent hours with him. They were able to, talk about the descriptive factors of D.B. Cooper. I was just scrolling up and down the suspect list, looking at photos. William J. Smith stood out to me immediately, and I actually had that, oh my God moment. This guy extremely resembles one of the D.B. Cooper composites. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he was D.B. Cooper alone, because you need a lot more evidence than that. And I even would like to turn this over to you guys and ask that as a challenge question. Do you think that there is a suspect that matches the composite sketches more so than William J. Smith? To go through everything step by step, we're going to go straight to the D.B. Cooper suspects WordPress, and I'm going to read some points and respond to them. William J. Smith was a New Jersey native and World War II veteran. After high school, he enlisted in the United States Navy and volunteered for combat aircrew training. After his discharge, he worked for Lehigh Valley Railroad and was affected by the Penn Central Transportation Company's bankruptcy, the largest bankruptcy in the U.S. at the time. So this is something that is going to be a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try to explain this after reading several different sources. When D.B. Cooper was on the plane and he's talking to people, he said that he had a grudge, but he did not specify whom he had a grudge with. And some people think that this could be some type of thing that's very cryptic, and other people think that it might just be an empty statement. But if there was a grudge that was being held, it could be because William J. Smith was heavily affected by this bankruptcy issue involving the railroad which he worked for. But the issue that seems to have been clarified is it does not appear that he would have been fired or he would have lost his job with the railroad, but he would have definitely experienced some things like perhaps losing a pension. That is one of the things that is talked about in the hypothesizing, if you will, or speculating, if you will, about why somebody like William J. Smith might say something like, he just had a grudge. Now let's look at the strengths of William J. Smith being D.B. Cooper. So he was age appropriate. He had been in World War II, so he had familiarity with military training, and he had a person whom he knew in the war, that's World War II, named Ira Daniel Cooper. And, of course, D.B. Cooper used the name Dan Cooper, which was mistakenly listed as D.B. Cooper by the media, and Ira Daniel Cooper could be the possible source for the hijacker's pseudonym. There are many similarities and coincidences that link him to a book by Max Gunther in 1985. Aluminum spiral chips were found on the clip-on tie that was left behind by D.B. Cooper, and that could have come from a locomotive maintenance facility, and as previously stated, William J. Smith worked for the railroad. He fits the description of the hijacker and looks very similar to the composite sketch, was well known to be a gentleman, which is how D.B. Cooper was described, and yet his knowledge of the railroad system would have helped him escape once he landed. And I think that means something to the effect of he would have been very familiar with the layout, the terrain, and just geographic areas all around the western part of the United States, going well beyond Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Tacoma, Washington, well beyond Washington State and Oregon, period. He would have just been familiar with those things. But I want to go back to this point here. Aluminum spiral chips found on the clip-on tie could have come from a locomotive maintenance facility. There are different types of let's just say there are different types of particles and fibers and chips that were found on D.B. Cooper's tie. Rare metals were found on D.B. Cooper's tie, and people struggled to find an explanation as to how and why that could have taken place. You guys will remember that when I did the episode on Joe Lakich as a D.B. Cooper suspect, I had to point out that Bill Rollins, who promotes Joe Lakich as a suspect, kept saying his suspect is the only person who has an explanation as to how and why those types of metallic particles got on D.B. Cooper's tie. And as we are going to see very easily, that's not true. I brought up the clear example of how Milton Vordal was someone who worked with rare metals and had patents involving different types of metals. Well, somebody like William J. Smith, again, worked for the railroad, and he's going to be dealing with all types of metallic particles. So when you hear things about how there is a piece of titanium that has a connection to a piece of stainless steel on D.B. Cooper's tie, well, somebody who worked for the railroad might have something like that there. And it's not completely beyond belief, or it's not something that is purely ridiculous. Now, as far as his activities outside of his military background, another thing that you will find very early on when you start reading about William J. Smith is that one of his biggest hobbies was working with model airplanes. So that again would show that he had familiarity with how airplanes work, let alone his military service, but also just this type of fascination with aviation. Because I said early on in these D.B. Cooper episodes, I did not believe, and I do not believe, that D.B. Cooper was some type of pure amateur when it came to airplanes. It seemed like he had a fairly strong understanding of them. He ordered the plane to fly at 10,000 feet, a maximum of 10,000 feet. He wanted the landing gear out so that that wouldn't be affected. He knew that he could lower the aft staircase and jump out the back without a cockpit override. So this seems like a guy who knew quite a bit about planes. Either that or he was just the luckiest person in the world, but it seems like it's quite to the contrary. It seems like the former. It seems like he knew exactly what he was doing. Now, on the D.B. Cooper suspect word press, these are the weaknesses against somebody such as William J. Smith as being D.B. Cooper. None of the strengths are strong enough to make Smith more than just a person of interest. It is unclear if Smith had any serious parachute experience, although some in the FBI view this as a strength. And this is one thing, though, that becomes very difficult in the D.B. Cooper case. Everything that you see about D.B. Cooper exists in speculation. This whole thing about how D.B. Cooper was acting like a gentleman, there are some people that would absolutely refute that and be like, D.B. Cooper was putting on an act. He was just staging the scene. He was just pretending to be that way because he was in character. It was all part of the ruse. But, that could, either one could be true. It's an unsolved case. But then you also have things such as D.B. Cooper smoking the cigarettes. I said in one of the very first episodes, there is this type of psychological profile that's been created that D.B. Cooper was not a regular smoker, that he was not a regular drinker, because they think that if he had been a regular smoker and drinker, then he would have been smoking more than just 8 cigarettes, that he would have been drinking a lot more than what he consumed on the plane, and that it all just turned out to be some type of facade, or once again, the person would have been in character. So those strikes aren't, they're not really strikes, they're just different possibilities. And I think we can look at harder pieces of evidence. Did this person have the knowledge and capabilities to pull this off? And I think that somebody like William J. Smith absolutely would have. Now, here's a different weakness that I read on another site, and that is that William J. Smith does resemble some aspects of the D.B. Cooper composite sketches, but he has a very different nose shape. He has a much larger and wider nose than any of the D.B. Cooper composite sketches. And one of the D.B. Cooper composites has an extremely narrow nose, an almost inhumanely narrow nose, so I don't really know if that's natural. I think that might actually be the mistake, and the one with the wider nose might be a more accurate composite. But the famous photo of William J. Smith that gets shared is from 1985, when he would have been 57 years old, and that's 14 years after the D.B. Cooper skyjacking. And this is something that we have to remember about all of these unsolved mysteries that involve composite sketches. There are 2 parts of your body that will never stop growing until the day you die, They will never stop growing, and they are your ears and your nose. Somebody's nose is going to change in 14 years. His nose would have been bigger in 1985 than it would have been in 1971. So I don't see any type of issue or problem with that. Now, as far as the accuracy of composites, a composite sketch is not what someone actually looked like. It's what the witnesses remembered them looking like. It's what they thought they looked like. So I think the D.B. Cooper sketches are somewhat reliable, and certain details might not be 100% accurate because the composites aren't completely identical. And as I said, the narrow nose thing, that's just one example of how something might not be completely perfect. Here's another strength, though, of William J. Smith being D.B. Cooper. Cooper was described as having a complexion that was almost olive-skinned, and William J. Smith had a complexion that was almost olive-skinned because he was of Hungarian descent. And there was something that I read just on one article. Oh, was it even from the Oregonian, when it's talking about how there's this profile that's been created by someone in the FBI about how they thought that D.B. Cooper would have had to have been an Italian Catholic or an American of Italian descent who was a Catholic. And that's one of the explanations, is because he had olive skin. And I don't think that that's a very strong point. I mean, there's so many ethnicities that are going to have olive-toned skin, and Hungarian would be one of them. Again, that's a strong point for William J. Smith actually being D.B. Cooper. But to help us out, we're going to go over to an article that is from the Daily Mail. And if you were going to just put in William J. Smith, D.B. Cooper into Google, this is one that would have come to the top of the list. In 2018, it appears that there was a resurgence of interest in William J. Smith as a D.B. Cooper suspect. A lot of the articles about him came out in 2018. So let's just have a read here as to why. An anonymous U.S. Army data analyst now believes the person responsible for the commercial hijacking, or the hijacking of the commercial airplane in 1971 and parachuting from the aircraft with $200,000 is a deceased man named William J. Smith. The analyst turned his research to the FBI this summer, claiming that there were too many connections to simply ignore. This comes amidst hundreds, if not thousands, of people investigating the case, claiming that they have finally discovered the identity of D.B. Cooper. Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, not all of these people can be D.B. Cooper. Countless individuals have come forward and said that they've identified D.B. Cooper, and they say it with either confidence or arrogance to the nth degree, and you're just like, now wait a second, not everybody is in complete agreement on anything. Investigators dedicated to uncovering the true identity of the infamous 1971 airplane hijacker claim that they now have final pieces of evidence that prove that William J. Smith was D.B. Cooper. The man dubbed by the FBI as D.B. Cooper is one of the 20th century's most compelling masterminds. He hijacked a Boeing 727 at Seattle-Tacoma Airport and held its crew and passengers hostage with a bomb. Well, there's a little bit more to the story than that, but we've already covered that. The anonymous researcher who calls William J. Smith D.B. Cooper now claims that he made the connection after reading the 1985 book D.B. Cooper, What Really Happened. The book's author, Max Gunther, claims that he was contacted by a man in 1972 who said that he was the real D.B. Cooper before cutting off all communication with him. But 10 years later, a woman named Clara contacted Gunther, claiming to be the widow of a man named Dan LeClaire, who turned out to be the man that reached out to the researcher. He went on to write a book detailing the relationship between Clara and D.B. Cooper. According to the Oregonian, the book was described as somewhat between nonfiction and speculation, and dismissed as a credible D.B. Cooper conspiracy. An FBI agent dismissed the author's account as highly unprofessional. However, the analyst was not fully convinced Gunther's story was untrue. His research led him to track down a deceased World War II veteran named Dan Clare. Clare's co-worker was William J. Smith, who became the analyst's prime suspect. Both Smith and Clare were born in New Jersey and worked at the Oak Island Rail Yard together. Oak Island, what a wonderful name. William J. Smith died at the age of 89, but a yearbook photo was included and a list of the alumni who were killed during the war. According to the Oregonian, the name Ira Daniel Cooper appeared. The analyst said he believes that Smith called Gunther and gave the name of his friend Claire in place of his own. well, that would be something that's like rather slick that somebody's doing. I mean, it's not exactly slick. It's almost just something that doesn't require an enormous amount of thought that would throw people off. Like, my name is Ned DeHaan, and if I were to just call somebody and say, oh yeah, my name is John Smith or something like that, and then people are going to be like, oh, well, some guy named John Smith called me. It's something simple that would throw people off, but it really goes to show you that these types of simple things lead to the mysteries being unsolved, whether it's the Zodiac case, which I talk about on Mondays, or the Ripper case, Jack the Ripper, that I talk about on Wednesdays, and I put out weekly segments about both of those. You find that it's the extremely simple things that confuse people. It happens all the time. And if you have any ideas about things for future episodes of Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer, you can also put your ideas in the comments section down below. You can contact me on Facebook and Instagram. All of that's in the description box. And you can also go through the links there and find one for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. But did this man, William J. Smith, actually contact somebody and claim that he was D.B. Cooper? It does not appear that that was done to everybody's satisfaction, but a lot of people seem to think that there's a strong possibility that this theory involving William J. Smith giving the name Dan LeClaire or Dan Clare to somebody could have actually happened. Last year, the FBI revealed that the hijacker also visited a similar facility. I mean, that one's a little bit out of whack, but I mean, that sentence doesn't really tie in too well. And now let's just say a team of FBI investigators are continuously investigating the case. Okay, so as far as William J. Smith being D.B. Cooper, I think there are a lot of strong points. I don't necessarily know if he would have had the parachuting experience to be D.B. Cooper or the awareness, but I mean, was he just somebody who committed the skyjacking? Someone who was very mad about his pension and benefits being affected because of the bankruptcy involved with his job? Was he somebody who got on the plane because he was almost acting out a fantasy, so to speak, or not even acting out a fantasy at that point? He's actually going through with everything, being this gentleman type who is skyjacking an airplane. And there was another point, and I don't remember the exact website that I read this on, or else I would give that source a shout out, but they said that they thought that if William J. Smith had been D.B. Cooper, then he would have actually spent the money that was used or that was obtained from the skyjacking. And I said on last week's episode, I didn't think that the money was spent because, well, all of the serial numbers were tracked, right? Or they were traceable. But what they said was, there was a way that he could have altered them using some type of printer so that they would be untraceable. I think that's a rather fascinating aspect of the story. I mean, is that what happened? Is that why D.B. Cooper didn't really care about getting $20 bills instead of hundreds? Because he knew how to alter the money so it would become untraceable? I mean, that's some food for thought. Now, that has nothing to do with William J. Smith. That's just a speculative statement, no matter whom D.B. Cooper was. But with William J. Smith, he's somebody who's fascinated with model airplanes. He is a World War II veteran, so he's definitely not going to be shy in the line of fire, so to speak. He's someone who matches the descriptions in perhaps a closer way than anyone that I've found so far. And right now, I would like to kind of go through that with you guys, because this is a Cooper Friday segment, and I do want to talk about William J. Smith, but also the strongest matches to the D.B. Cooper composite sketch. Number one, I said, we have William J. Smith, we also have Milton Vordahl, and then we also have Joe Lakich. I think has lots of similarities, not like a perfect resemblance with Joe Lakich, where it's just like you would have that experience, like I said, oh my God, that guy looks just like the sketches. But once you look very closely at Joe Lakich, there are lots of similarities there. And those are the three that I've encountered that seem to be the strongest matches. And that's where I want to hear from you. Whom do you think resembles the D.B. Cooper composite sketch the most? And I also want your response to the challenge question, do they have D.B. Cooper's DNA? That would be another one that, just give your feedback. What do you think? Do you think they have D.B. Cooper's DNA and they just haven't found the guy yet? And who do you think would be a better suspect than any of the ones that I've named so far? I also want to point out that I'm talking about all types of different suspects here on Cooper Friday. Last week I was talking to you guys about Walter Recca, and what I said was, I'll save you the entire trouble of listening to the episode. I said, I went into that suspect with an enormous amount of enthusiasm. There was an audio recorded confession of this guy talking about being D.B. Cooper, but he doesn't match any of the physical descriptions, in my opinion. He also had blue eyes, and it was reported that D.B. Cooper had brown eyes, and I think that the entire Walter Recca story was more or less made up and fabricated. I'm not sure whose idea it was first, but that's my take on the subject. And ultimately, though, I just want to know more about what you guys think. Please put your ideas in the comment section down below. If you like this video, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And feel free to go through some of the links in the description box once again. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there was always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. And that's all for me now. Until next time.